Wonderful to welcome all of you today to this fireside chat hosted by NeoSystems on the interim rule and next steps for CMMC post November 30th. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Lani Dawson Arena. I'm the president of the Native Hawaiian Organizations Association, and I'm a director and policy committee member of the Native American Contractors Association. I'm also the director of advocacy for Dawson. Today's session will focus on the recent interim rule and will address common challenges and solutions to federal contractors as they are rolling out CMMC. So let me start at this point with an introduction of our speakers. First, we are so privileged to have Katie Arrington. She is the Chief Information Security Officer for the Acquisition and Sustainment to the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. She is the author of the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Framework and therefore our preeminent authority on it. She serves as the central hub and the integrator within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment to align acquisition, sustainment, cyber strategy, and efforts to enhance cybersecurity within the defense industrial base. She is responsible to ensure the incorporation of integrated security and cyber efforts within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment with the purpose of providing a central coordination point and a common compliance standard that serves to synchronize the various existing disparate cybersecurity efforts and standards across the department and industry as it relates to the Department of Defense acquisition and sustainment efforts. So welcome, Katie. We're so pleased to have you.
Mahalo.
Aloha.
Aloha.
For those of you who may not know, I'm here in Oahu, and Katie and I were chatting about that prior to our live stream. So that's our little inside joke. Anyways, let me also welcome our second speaker, who we are very privileged to have. Ed Bassett is the Chief Information Security Officer for NeoSystems. He's a senior cybersecurity and risk management subject matter expert with over 32 years of experience in all aspects of security and private program architecture, design, management, and operations. His experience spans government, healthcare, financial services, and other industries, and it includes risk management, program planning, application and software security, security assessments, audits, and security operations. He built and led a global security consulting practice specializing in security strategy, assessment and testing, and managed security services. He's been the principal advisor to many Fortune 500 and government clients on information system security, responsible for securing their critical information assets for e-commerce transactions, sensitive health records, and classified military communications. Let me take a moment to thank our host, NeoSystems. NeoSystems is a systems integrator that serves the greater federal and state government contracting community with compliance-driven managed services that cover all of the CMMC cybersecurity requirements. NeoSystems also offers secured hosting solutions for ERP systems and third-party software for their FedRAMP-ready FISMA moderate cloud. So I think the next thing we want to just chat a little bit about is how this fireside chat came about. It stems from a conversation that Elizabeth Jimenez of NeoSystems and I had as we were following up after the NHOA Small Business Summit last month. NHOA and NACA have really been keeping our ears to the ground on issues related to CMMC implementation because this is so critical to all of our members. Most of our members provide services to DoD. Most are well beyond the CMMC 101 phase and are deep in the midst of implementing CMMC requirements within their organizations. To support these efforts, Elizabeth and I were chatting and we thought it would be great to partner together NeoSystems, NHOA, and NACA to bring this discussion to you on the interim rule and to address the questions and concerns that are being faced by federal contractors as they go through implementation. And most importantly, to present solutions to your questions and concerns. So that's it for my introduction. Before I turn it over, I understand that there is a resources section on the webcast, the WorkCast webpage. And Ed, I wondered if you might be able to explain that.
I can't see that view, honestly, so I don't know exactly what people are seeing out there, but hopefully some resources that you can click on to get access to some information. In today's session, we are going to be talking about the CMMC and the interim rule kind of in progress. So one of the questions Katie asked as we were setting up was, does everybody know about CMMC and what it is? And I think the answer is, most people probably already do. So we're not going to do the CMMC 101 piece today, but the resources page should have some of that information. We are going to talk about, for those of you who have heard about it, need to take action on it, what are those actions? What do you need to do when? What are the priorities? And how should that be guided for small businesses?
Thank you so much, Ed.
So, well, do you want me to get started, or you have more on your side?
No, that is great. So let me turn the stage over to Katie and Ed to discuss the interim rule and some of the challenges and solutions. I'm going to sign off camera. I will sign back on as we get close to our end time so that I can make some wrap-up remarks and ask Katie and Ed for any final comments that they have. So welcome everyone and have a really great session.
Well, thank you, Lani. I do want to make an announcement first on the questions. If you have questions, I'll be asking some questions of Katie. We'll be talking about these topics of interest, but if you have things that are burning questions in your mind, please do submit those on the Q&A feature within WorkCast. And if we can answer those questions on the call today, we will. As I said, our theme today is going to be on understanding the DoD's expectations and the common challenges that are faced by small businesses in particular as they want to meet those expectations. So send in your questions. We'll get to as many as we can. If we get questions we can't answer today, then we will circle back on those with you through NHOA and NACA. First, Katie, very much thanks for joining me here today. Always good to sit down and talk CMMC, and always perfect when we have Katie Arrington to do it with, because then we have authoritative information, straight up, fresh, unfiltered, as it always is. Thank you, Katie.
No problem, Ed. So it's coming from being a small business owner myself, you get the job done when it's needed. And to those people tuning in today, to get the job done, I'm in my car. So you have to forgive the backdrop. I don't have the capability to do anything amazing. So this is what happens when you have to get the do done in the Pentagon.
So CMMC, big deal, right? It's trying to reach 300,000 plus companies that comprise the defense industrial base. Today, we're going to talk about operational rollout and what we need to do to achieve that promise and really reach all 300,000 of those companies and raise the bar on how we're defending ourselves against our adversary. I'd like to get started with those newly released DFARS clauses, the interim rule that Lani mentioned. So this rule is set to go into effect on November 30th. This rule starts implementation of CMMC over the expected 5-year time frame. It also has some near-term enforcement of the existing DFARS requirements for contractors to implement NIST 800-171 for all of their covered contractor information systems. So the actual security requirements are not new. They're already out there in DFARS 7012 clause, but the DoD is now adding this new mandatory reporting of compliance scores and expected full compliance dates. What is your expectation in terms of the immediate impact that these are going to have on the companies in our audience today?
Well, it's already had an impact first. So the history of the DFAR clause 7012 is, back when President Obama signed an executive order in 2015, putting the NIST, the National Institute of Standard and Technology, special publication 800-171, which is what the DoD bases our cybersecurity requirements for the DIB. Now, the requirements in the building are the NIST NIST 800-53, which is for federal systems. So back in 2015, when we put this into the DFAR rule and we said everyone needs to get this done, since then, companies have been attesting that they're either doing the 171 or they have a POAM, a plan of action. We've realized, as I think everybody knows, cybersecurity is a huge vulnerability. We're losing a tremendous amount as a nation, but more importantly, as small businesses, we need you, and we need to get you to the best possible security that you can put forth to protect your company, protect your IP, protect your employees. So the trust but verify is what we're really trying to get down with the immediate what's happening with the interim rule. And that's a whole nother thing of, the federal government on a whole said that this group, this defense industrial base, was so valuable that we went and they put what could have been a proposed rule, which would have taken another maybe year to get in place. They put it as an interim rule with 60 days. So we've already seen the bar getting raised in companies realizing with the CMMC model how to really implement the 171, or to take it and I say break it down to English. It's sometimes hard for a small business who might not be a cyber professional to understand the totality of what's in the NIST, and the CMMC model is created for that. So we've watched our internal, we do continuous monitoring. We do see how much data the adversary is gaining, and our threat intel. We've seen the bar already being raised, and people getting more, I would say, risk adverse. And we're really starting to see some fundamental changes. And I can't believe it's all happening. And if you think of government time, it's been a blink of an eye. And we went from talking about this in January of 2019 to actually implementation at the end of 20. And that is unheard of in our world. So it's already making its wanted and desired effect. But now gets the hard part of understanding what you need to do to maintain and to win work in the future with the department.
So, Katie, we've gotten a lot of questions from companies who have really not worried about the NIST 800-171 before. And maybe they had reasons for doing that. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they were right. Maybe they're wrong. They believe because they don't store or process any covered defense information that there's nothing that they need to do there. So the new reporting requirement has them worried, right? They're worried that maybe they misinterpreted the DFARS 7012. They're worried maybe they do have some CUI after all. They're worried that their large prime might not view them favorably if they don't have a compliance score report, or, and how can they report a score on a covered contractor information system when they don't have any? So what's your advice for those companies that might have taken that stance previous to the interim rule coming out?
So one of the things that we have been talking about in DoD, and I have been, to say prolific would be an understatement. I think this is my 400th speaking event. I try and do as many opportunities to engage the community as possible. So up to 3 and 4 times a day. And universally and categorically, we have said that cybersecurity is foundational to acquisition. And we needed to make it foundational. It's not something that we're willing to trade off for cost, schedule, and performance, and that all DoD contracts require some level of cyber certification. We need you to understand that the 17 basic controls in the CMMC level 1, which if you were to take that self-assessment, you'd probably maybe get 17 controls. Simple things like, do you change your passwords? How often? Do you keep a control log of that? So you may have thought because you're not storing or transmitting CUI that the rules don't apply to you. They absolutely will apply to you. You need to get ready. The time is now. And as we move forward with the CMMC, every DoD contract by the end of 2025 will have some form of a cybersecurity requirement, either level 1 all the way up to level 5, with the only exception are micro purchases, which are under $10,000, and the COTS, product specific. So everybody has to have some level of cyber. So don't think it doesn't pertain to you. It absolutely does. To what level and to when is the bigger question.
Gotcha. And then you've spoken before about the number of DIB companies that will need CMMC level 1 versus those who need level 3. I mean, it's a majority that are in level 1, right? It's a large number of those 300,000. If those companies have focused on implementing the basic safeguards that are in the FAR clause, those items that are in there, and they're ready for CMMC level 1, are they all set until they get a contract that has DFARS 7021 in it that basically requires that certification? Like, can they say, okay, I'm good? Or is there something they need to do with respect to the NIST 800-171 scores? I mean, I don't think they do because they don't have any CUI, right?
Well, so this is what I would say. What is it? A pound of prevention or an ounce of prevention worth a pound of regret. I would definitely go and look and make sure that you're not currently attesting in the 7012 clause. That's first and foremost. Please go back and check and validate. You may not realize that you're touching CUI, and that's controlled unclassified information. Secondly, look at any new work that you have coming up or you're forecasting. If you're forecasting for a contract award after December 1st of this year, so November 30th, just a few short weeks away, and you're up for a contract award, you should really reach out to your core and say, hey, do I need to do, and what level am I at? The SPRS registration, which is the Supplier Performance Risk System, is open and available. So it's CAT card enabled, right? So you have to go in prior to contract award and log in your company's information, your cage code, and record your self-assessment. That's if you have the 7012 clause in your contract currently, which means that you are already touching and attesting to the 110 controls of the NIST. Now, we don't want this to be a gig, a negative, right? Right now, all we need you to do is go in, register your self-assessment in the SPRS link, the supplier risk. It's the Supplier's Performance Risk System. I'm so sorry, I mess that up every time. And you'll go through, and there are things there that you may not know what they are, or you may never have seen them. Like, what is an SSP, a security plan, right? What is your system security plan? Well, if you've never done that before, we get it, and we don't want to ding you. We have a site called projectspectrum.io. That's projectspectrum.io. If you go to that link and you click on the resource tab, there's a walkthrough of what to do to register the SPRS. There's an explanation of the methodology that you need to look at for a rating score of your company. And it gives you a step-by-step process on how to fill out a SPRS registration. That's the first thing. I would do that regardless. You really need to understand your cybersecurity posture. It's good business sense. The 17 controls in level 1, that basic level of assessment, are things you should be doing at home. They aren't unique to Department of Defense work. They're everywhere, and you should be doing the basics every day. General Honore, Ed, do you remember him from Hurricane Katrina?
No, I don't. Sorry.
So he was the Army general on the ground after Hurricane Katrina. And, he, as well as many other military graduates of academies, says, keep it simple. And then he says the word stupid. But if we do the basics every single day, if we remember that passwords are something that you should be changing as often as every month. At the start of COVID, the pandemic, one of the things that floored me, and I think I went on LinkedIn and did a PSA that day. It said, hey, in these hard, troubling times, let's remember to a better time in a better place. Copy and paste and tell all your friends. What street did you grow up on? What's your favorite season? What was the name of your first dog? Now, that's the kind of basic stuff that we laugh at it, but that's the thing that an adversary just takes and compiles that. There's software you can buy off of $20 off of Amazon to do a password breaker. Let's think, and let's not make it easy for the adversary to get in. Let's make it harder for them. And going and taking that self-assessment will give you something to reflect upon and think about as you're looking at bids in the future. Where do you want to see yourself? Where do you want your business to be? How are you going to get there? Because our national defense, as I've said so many times, and Ed, you and I feel like it's like the Regis and Kathy Lee show. I mean, we've talked so often about it, but it's really one of those things of, where do you want your company to be, and how can we get you there? Because you are our national defense. It's not like I've got a pool or a tremendous amount of companies we don't tap. We need you, and we need you to be here in the long term. And the only way to do that is to help you get through and be cyber secure. The rest we can work on, and we can get better every day. But the basics, I got to get you there now.
And that's good advice. Good question. Where do you want to be? And we're seeing a lot of uncertainty around the issue of CUI, what qualifies, what doesn't. And as service providers, we tend to tell our customers to talk to their legal counsel and their contracting officers. But then we hear that when they do, they're not getting a definitive guidance necessarily from those folks. So, they may want to separate their systems into those that handle CUI and those that don't. It makes sense that they want to, keep their costs under control. But the fork for a lot of small contractors is really between level 1 and level 3. And there's a big difference in the amount of effort it takes to get to those.
Huge.
So the question is, do I have any CUI whatsoever, even a little bit? Because it only takes one little piece, right? And so, many companies are looking at implementing the NIST 800-171 and then eventually CMMC level 3 as a way to sort of hedge their bet, right? They don't want to say, I can't take any CUI and be wrong on that topic, because that's not who they want to be. And they view their ability to handle CUI as a competitive advantage. So, whether or not they have any today, and you mentioned a minute ago, Katie, even if you don't have it today, look forward at those contracts you're going to do. Look forward at the customers you're trying to convince that you're a capable company. As a security professional, it's pretty easy for me to say, I always encourage those who, want to do a better job at protecting their systems. Yeah, do that. And I think you're kind of heading down that path. Level 3 is a good target if you're not sure. In other words, if you're not really sure that you don't have any CUI and you're never going to touch any. So, there are companies that are in situations where there's nothing about their business that involves any CUI and never would. And they can be very sure of that. And level 1 might be a good target for them. But do you think for those who are uncertain, level 3 is the target?
So what I'd say, my husband owns a surveying company. Doesn't do any work with the government, but and when he and I were setting up his environment, and I said, this is what you should strive to be at. Why? If a prime inadvertently sends you something you shouldn't, are you sure the adversary's not watching? And I can guarantee you the adversary's watching, right? So the things that I see every day in the Pentagon, and I'm looking at that beautiful building right now, the adversary has been sitting in the environments for a long time. Make no bones or discussion about it, right? China has been the conversation of maybe the past 2 years. They have been on this path. China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, other terrorist states. They have been working diligently to break our supply chain. How do you think they knew where to go? You may not think that you are a transmitter of CUI, and I do apologize for the sun is setting over here in Washington. You may not think that you would be a target. I spoke to construction companies today, and their big thing was, why would they even care? Well, absolutely, the adversary wants to know how you bid on your work and what you get in your email. And one of them asked, and I said, you do your bids by AutoCAD. You're the part of the deal that you get when you go to bid for a contract is we send you the plans so you understand how much asphalt you're going to be laying and where the infrastructure lies. Think about that as a company for you. You may not today be doing any, and I'll just use the example of a work with the F-35 program. But if somebody inadvertently sent you something and you had that, and we're not talking the major architecture to a plan, it's the bite-sized pieces is what the adversary's been going after. They don't need to get the infiltrate the large super primes of the world when they can much easier navigate the exfil of your network and live and sit inside your network and wait till you get better at it and then take you down. Because remember, the art of war and something that I really think that companies, people, our democracy, it's easier to defy and take us down from within than outside, right? So what do we mean by that? So you're a small business and you are making fasteners only for, 15 people, and you make a particular fastener with a particular mill of diameter, everything. It's a lot easier for the adversary to mess with one of your specs and let you deliver an inferior quality than it is to work about a cyber threat on any other area. I mean, let you do your own damage. And unless you're doing the things to keep your company safe every single day, things like that will happen. And oh, by the way, while the adversaries in your network, they're not just going to take the little tiny piece of DoD data. They're going to take everything that they can take about you, your company, your employees, your supply chain, your customers, and they're going to use it against you. So you shouldn't think the NIST 171, that's a bar too high. If you really want to be here in the long haul, you need to think about, how am I going to get there? And look at it as a company. Are you going to give yourself that opportunity organically? Or are you going to look externally to cloud service providers that can provide you the capability? Because we don't ever want small businesses to start and stay small. I mean, we love that that's how, and Ed, I'm on my little rampant and I go down there sometimes, but no company in the world started off as a super mega conglomerate. They got big, they grew, they matured up, and we want that. We need that. So to think that you shouldn't be doing the NIST 171 and you're worried about CUI, call your contracting officer. Look at your contracts. But really, stop and think, why wouldn't I want to be as secure as possible when the government is saying, okay, it's an allowable cost. We want you to be there. And level 1 certification is not, it's 17 no-cost controls, cost about $1,000 to $3,000 to get certified. Through a CMMC AB approved assessor, and that you should strive to want to be at level 3, and position yourself. Now, part of the thing with the DoD is that as we have asked the DIB community to get better on cyber, we've told ourselves that, and we have a new 5,000 series about cybersecurity so that we can help the PMs think about CUI. They think about the waterfall. The DoD CUI.mil website is up. It's got a desk reference guide, step by step, to understand if you're handling CUI, so that you are doing the utmost you can to buy down the risk to ensure that you stay here and that you are part of our national defense. We don't build anything in that beautiful building I'm looking at, other than a lot of paper recycling. We get money. We do acquisition programs. We write policy. We develop requirements. But you, on this webinar, you are the doers. You are national defense. It's not this hypothetical thing. If you're not as secure as possible, then we aren't. And I can tell you, I go to sleep at night knowing all that I know because of people like you, because you're working every day to get better, and that's the best that we can hope for, right? Is that we all understand the importance and the criticality of this, and that everybody's trying to do the absolute right thing to get to good. And on that, I shut my eyes at night and I go to sleep, because I know people like you, Ed, and Elizabeth, and everybody are out there trying to do things for the right side of good.
There's a lot of people trying to do the right thing. And I think I was going to move on to some of the common challenges, but before I do, I've got a couple of really good audience questions I want to work in. One says, do the subcontractors also have to submit assessment to SPRS? Don't even need Katie to answer that one. You can watch your head nod. Yes, subcontractors too, all the way down. It's turtles all the way down, right? Is that the saying? And so
the waterfall is in full effect.
The second one is, this is my favorite. Even though we may not touch CUI, is it still possible to attain CMMC level 3 or higher? Also, head shaking in the yes direction. Katie, your head's not shaking. There we go. Okay. Yes, you can definitely achieve CMMC level 3. There is a weird 2-second delay in your phone, I think, in mine, but so yes, you can definitely, you don't have to have CUI. So I think that's I was kind of talking to that earlier. There's people who are confused about what is and what isn't. You can't go wrong by being conservative and protecting your systems, and having really good cyber hygiene. You don't have to prove you have CUI. It's the opposite. If you want to be level 1, you really got to be 100% confident you don't have any CUI and you won't have any CUI. So I think the default path should be level 3. Katie, you said it a minute ago, and I wrote it down. So level 3 is not too high of a bar. So maybe let's dive into that a little bit. Let's talk about some of the common challenges for operational rollout. That's the meat and potatoes of compliance, right? As we've been working with contractors to implement the security practices and the processes they need for CMMC, we're seeing that this is more than just a security overlay. I think a lot of people start out thinking, okay, I'm going to add a little security to what I'm already doing and I'm going to be good. But we're seeing that the journey is really driving people to rethink their IT strategy. It's causing them to catch up on deferred maintenance, maybe swap out service providers who don't have process maturity that's required by CMMC. We're seeing it driving cloud adoption. So all these things are coming from what I think starts as a cybersecurity, but then has some other things. And no question, some of the things I just mentioned are intertwined with the fact that the pandemic has driven us all to remote work. So that's causing some IT rethink as well. But CMMC is no question a major driver. And I think this is a great outcome, right? It's getting to some of the underlying weaknesses that our adversaries are exploiting. So I guess, Katie, can you give us a perspective from DoD perspective? How does CMMC fit into the larger picture of IT strategy? You mentioned the Spectrum.io and some other things. I mean, there's CMMC is a piece of it, but there's a lot of things going on around how DoD acquires IT, and it's all intermingled. Yes.
Oh my gosh, yes. So CMMC is a piece of a greater effort for the Department of Defense. So first and foremost, if CMMC turns into a checklist, we have absolutely failed. It is not a checklist. I get crazy when people say, "Oh, well, I've gone through the checklist." No. What CMMC was created was to build on maturity and to help instill critical thinking around cybersecurity. That, when you talk about these companies are coming back and they're realizing, wow, I've gone through 2 mergers and acquisitions and I really haven't changed much of my architecture. That problem, right? That's a problem. Or I've added offices, right? And I'm using the same CSP I always have. Okay, so I appreciate that, but are you sure that each one of your employees understands how to access security securely? Are you updating your VPN capability? Okay, you've got antivirus, but do you have it on all of your devices? it's giving the critical thinking skills that are so needed around cyber, and in the department as well. I mean, you think about all the things that we're going through right now. Part of my job, I'm CISO for A&S, and Lani gave a beautiful, introduction of my bio. But the reality is, I'm in charge of implementing cybersecurity from the weapon system itself, the defense critical infrastructure, and to the DIB. And it's critical thinking that's getting us there, right? I need to think critically about when I find a vulnerability in a weapon system, right? If I don't have a way to communicate that to the DIB partner who's actually doing it, we're missing it. And when we've this critical thinking of realizing that in the Internet of Things and COVID, and you've heard me talk about this before, that, it's COVID is a horrible pandemic, but I can tell you one thing: when you give us lemons here in the United States, we make lemonade, and we're making some lemonade right now, right? We're taking the pandemic, we're taking cybersecurity as an opportunity to get better, to do better, and to be better. So, I mean, we really need to look at this as the critical thinking. We have DevSecOps or DevOps, right? We're looking at that. We're looking at when we make security foundational to acquisition, what we're really saying is, industry, we're doing wide adoption. Well, what happens when you do that, right? You drive down costs. You make it very competitive. We have watched CSPs and managed service providers come in and understand finally the importance and criticality of creating pricing models that small businesses can take at bite size versus, $5 to $20 million lump sum payments. They're realizing, oh, we need to make this in small business, quantifiable, via contract, resources so they can get reimbursed in building it in their rates. So we are having a total reform in DoD, but CMMC is one piece of a much larger puzzle of how do we put the right things, the right resources, the right capability at the right time to ensure that you are around for the long term. So it really is amazing to watch all of the incredible things that have been going on in the department for the past few years. And hopefully everyone on this call understands, or webinar understands, the only way you're seeing me today is through cyber. And the only way that we are going to be able to exist as a nation, to maintain our economic independence, to maintain our capital markets, to provide healthcare, education, and everything that has happened in the pandemic. Thank God Jeff Bezos was around, right? Who knew Amazon would be so critical? That if we're not doing our utmost best daily to ensure the sanctity and the security of all of those things, with the exception of Jeff Bezos, but your children's education, your financial capability, your connection to loved ones. If we're not doing our best to make sure that the adversary won't take that over, then we're falling short. And the CMMC is not a checklist. It's about critical thinking, because China has been around a little bit longer than our lovely democracy, and Russia as well. Communism is a 4-letter word, folks. Don't forget it. This democracy is what made this country the greatest country in the world, and do everything you can to protect us, all of us, every day.
So, Katie, I want to ask about the work we're doing to close those gaps, right? To bring the bar up. Right, the work we're actually doing. I think when I hear people talk about the timing of CMMC, 5-year rollout, the concern I hear is, well, will there be enough assessors to meet the timeline? I don't think that's the issue, right? I think most contractors need to first map out their path to compliance, and there's a whole bunch of work to do well before an assessor is needed. So I think, if you go to the CMMC AB website, they have a 10-step path to certification. And right in the middle, step number 5 says, close any identified gaps. To me, that's about 90% of the work. Maybe that's because that's the business I'm in. I don't know. But, my advice to those who are worried about the assessor population, Well, first off, I would say I'm amazed at how fast this is moving. You mentioned, government time. This is moving amazingly fast. The fact that we have any assessors this fast is quite frankly a miracle. So anyway, for those people who are worried about the assessor population, my advice is focus first on having a solid roadmap of compliance. If you're not already 100% of the way there, and most people are not, get to that first. I see the marketplace responding strongly, right? So cloud service providers, managed service providers, technology vendors, all aligning with CMMC. And my call right before this one was with Microsoft, and Microsoft doing tremendous things. I'm not plugging them per se, but all you mentioned, Amazon, right? These guys are putting a huge amount of resources into it. Companies like NeoSystems, we're putting a lot of work into aligning with CMMC. Are you pleased with how you're seeing that portion of the ecosystem developing in terms of providing good choices for companies like those in our audience today, small businesses who need expertise, they need products they can buy and consume? Are you pleased with how that's developing in terms of pace, alignment, et cetera?
Absolutely. I mean, and that's when, I first came into the Pentagon, coming from industry, and knowing our industrial base so well. Never have we put something out to industry that we haven't been able to solve for government, because that is what we do. We knew that going out and putting this as a industry, I don't like to, well, the analogy is, I didn't want the DoD to come in and be responsible for the assessments, right? Government, it's our defense budget, and I like to say it's lumpy, right? It goes up and goes down. And I wanted something, when we started to think about this, that was outside of government and let industry dictate it, because industry knows how to get it right, to work the competitive nature, to drive down the cost. If we kept it in the DoD, I appreciate all of our efforts, but we're not really fast. You know what I mean? We work in very different life cycles. And even the 5-year timeline, people are like, industry, imagine your cell phone technology 5 years ago. And that's what we work in, 5-year cycles. So when we said we need to start this now to get it done in 5 years, it literally will take us that long. The big here on this one is, why 5 years? Well, I can't insert the CMMC into into a current contract. I can't even insert the DFARS clause 7019 into existing work. I have to wait till a contract comes up for recompete before we can put it in. So it's literally a life cycle, but that should not stop you. Industry has far exceeded our expectation, but you always have. So why wouldn't you do it this time? I mean, the world waits for us to be innovative, to copy us. I am enthralled with how this industry, who I knew would rise up. I mean, you're offering security to the government. Why wouldn't you offer it to each other? Absolutely impressed.
Cool. I've got a question from the audience. I want to work in. It says we're a small business that uses Google Business as our service provider, and so not to talk about a specific item here, specific vendor here. They're using those products. The question is, how are the big service providers implementing CMMC, or are they providing some kind of CMMC synergy with their customers? So again, not to talk about product A versus product B, but what are you seeing, Katie, with respect to the big service providers and small service providers like us? What are you seeing those service providers doing in terms of the synergy with their customers?
So it's, most all have mapped out, if they're a CSP and they have their FedRAMP certification. So we are giving reciprocity for FedRAMP certification. So let's say that you're a small company, you have 40 employees, and that you want to use a CSP to I guess, click in place portions of the requirements for CMMC level 3. Well, we're saying you don't need to go reinvent the wheel. We're going to take FedRAMP reciprocity. So look at the service providers, FedRAMP, medium or high. My brain left for a minute there. Equate that, which we have on the websites for reciprocity, and say, okay, I'm going to buy this capability for this part of my CMMC certification, because we're definitely seeing them map out to what level of CMMC they meet. There are some that it's on their websites right now where they actually took the control by control and mapped out what they do. There are some that just say that they're equal or like. Take your time, research them. But that's absolutely where we're looking to go. And there's, I'm not going to comment on specific products. That would be not right. But it's a combination of many, many, many out there, and just make sure that they're mapping out to the CMMC model what they have the capability to provide.
Thanks. And we at NeoSystems, I mean, we specifically are aligning our services with CMMC. It's in our contract. It's on our website, right? I mean, that's a specific alignment. So I think we're seeing that not just ourselves, but a lot of service providers are taking the time to take their offerings and explain to their customers how it gets them down the path, right? In a very explicit way, so that people can do that comparison and say, have I hit all the items?
And that's part of what you should look at, right? Because if you want to grow your company and you're looking at your level 3 certification, and today you may not have the capability, but in your BMP, your bid and proposal, and as you build your strategic roadmap for your company, what is it I would need to add to my workforce to be able to achieve this if I was going to do it in-house, and start thinking strategically about where you want to be. Where do you want your company to be in 5 years and in 10 years? And how are you going to get there? Is it going to be relying on, and there's nothing wrong with cloud service providers or managed service providers to create that capability? Is it something that you feel strongly about and you want to develop that infrastructure of your organic corporation or company to be able to provide? And do you need money to do it, right? So if you're a small business and you're looking to fill that gap, what are the ways that you can go about getting there? Primes, this is a huge opportunity. A lot of the primes are reaching out to their subs and saying, hey, we can make a cloud instantiation that is FedRAMP high, that you can come in and do the work that is CUI. Would you be interested? If that's the case, right, that's great. Make sure that you're looking through the contractual obligations, right? Because if you're going into someone else's cloud and you're bringing your own IP, your intellectual property to it, make sure your bases are covered. This is about critical thinking, about cybersecurity, and the best asset you have is you. Your brain power, your knowledge, what you know. So make sure you're thinking about this stuff critically, but absolutely, this shouldn't be something you sit around and say, well, maybe. You should absolutely say, this is where I want to go. This is the type of company I want to be. My mom used to say to me, don't dress for the job you have, dress for the job you want. Get up every day to go out and be that next Fortune 500 company, because they didn't get there by happenstance. And, most of the providers on this call today are coming from one of our most valuable assets, and the Native American, it's huge what you guys offer us every single day. So we want to make sure you're there, that you grow and you get better and you're there for the long term.
So Katie, I want to riff off your comment about critical thinking a little bit. You said a while back in this conversation that CMMC should not be considered a checklist, and I've heard you say that before. I couldn't agree more with that philosophy. Today, a lot of companies operate without having a huge amount of visibility into what's really happening on their IT systems, and we've seen over and over that successful attacks are often not detected directly by the victims. They're found by external parties in many cases. So one of the really positive outcomes of CMMC that I believe we're already seeing is companies that are taking stock of what they have. Where's their sensitive data? Who can access it? How effective is that security tool we bought 2 years ago? What security is my service provider actually providing? We're seeing a level of executive attention to cybersecurity issues that's more than ever before. And this increased awareness, to my view, has benefits way beyond any checklist, right? So yes, we're all looking at the CMMC standards. Yes, we need to make sure we do all those things, but we're having conversations with CEOs and CIOs and people who may have not been that involved in cybersecurity before. You talked about critical thinking. You talked about dressing for the job you want to have. So as you think about small business owners, right, the people who are in the ultimate decision-making seat about what path that company is going to take, what's your advice in terms of how CMMC compliance benefits their company, right? So I get the level, I can bid on the jobs, but what about those other sort of ancillary benefits that they get by having more visibility, making those critical thinking decisions on behalf of their company? Heads up, not just saying to their staff, go follow the checklist, do the minimum, but taking that other approach where they're really looking at this hard.
So the two big points on that. First, the C-suite and leadership are really coming aware in the past 18 months to 2 years that cybersecurity is one of the drivers of every business. There's something called, if you haven't read it, the National Cyber Solarium Report. Solarium with an S. It was funded out of the NDAA in 2019. It's a bipartisan measure, huge thing here. The report details six sectors we need to get better at in the U.S. If you go to that report and you read Section 4, it's about a national cybersecurity program that all U.S. companies should be a part of, and that they need to use Section 4.4.3 says to build upon the DoD CMMC. And where the C-suite really needs to start paying attention is that in Section 4.4.4 of that National Cyber Solarium report, they want to amend Sarbanes-Oxley, the act which determines how we communicate to each other, what value our companies have, and they want it to be amended to include cybersecurity. Why? Because in mergers and acquisitions, your cybersecurity, your security rating score, SRS, write that down, SRS. You may not be aware of it, but just like your credit report out there, the three bigs, know that every public-facing IP company that has a website, you have a security rating score, and you got to know the banks, the financial institutions are looking at that. They're part of the new norm is going to be, and I it hurts my heart to say it because I know what it means, but cybersecurity insurance is going to be as common as driver's insurance, motor vehicle insurance, right? You think about your license to drive and how you actually function with the risk reduction strategy with driving is your insurance rate. You got to bet that your cyber insurance rate will end up being in some form or fashion related to your posture about cybersecurity as a company and your effectiveness of putting in risk mitigation measures to protect your value. So if they're not paying attention, they really should, and it needs to become foundational to what you do in industry. I can't think of one industry today that doesn't have cyber in it as an essential core to their livelihood. I cannot think of one. I've spoken, Ed, to you so many times, and I'll go back to the very first speech I ever gave about CMMC. It was to a group of university students, and I said, tell me one thing in your life without cyber. And the young man that raised his hand up in the front row and said, this apple. And I said, unless that apple magically appeared, it got there through cyber. It got there through a logistics system to you. It either was there through a financial system when you swiped your card. Everything has cyber in it. And you've got to understand the criticality to your business's livelihood. And it is not a checklist. It is learning critical thinking about how to posture yourself to be here in the long term, not the short term. SecDef's coming in. Can you hear him?
Choppers coming in. So a whole bunch of small businesses, I mean, they worry about cost, right? Is CMMC really affordable? And even if you push aside the argument that security is cheaper than a breach, I think the requirements are very affordable. I think there's a tendency to overestimate cost, maybe because of the complexity, right? This is level 3 has 130 controls. If you're not in the industry, maybe you haven't read through all those before, so they're not familiar language. And maybe that's overwhelming, right? But we've already seen affordable, small business-oriented solutions emerging. We've seen standardized approaches, plug-and-play managed services, cloud services that are easy to consume, predefined secure computing enclaves. We've seen all that stuff in the marketplace less than a year after introduction of CMMC. So, my goal is to make sure the solutions that we offer make good security and cyber hygiene affordable for any company. I mean, that's our mission in supporting the defense industrial base. Obviously, you and the DoD feel the expectations are reasonable and achievable, but certainly beyond level 1, it takes a concerted effort. What would your advice be in terms of how small businesses who are cost conscious, how should they worry about controlling their cost? If they want to get to level 3, they want to do that in an affordable way, what should they be doing to keep their costs under control? It's easy to spend too much, right? So how do they get good cyber without high cost, excessive cost?
So first and foremost, with the CMMC, when we put it into a contract, we understand that you are going to build it into your rate. So know that in that DFAR rule, which is out on the Federal Registrar right now, we have assumptions put in there of how much we believe cybersecurity should cost. We have broken it down by NAICS code, because we understand small businesses are in the small business category. Small isn't really small. So we did it based on a NAICS category. We went to a micro, which is less than 5 employees, to a super. And we've broken that down so that companies can look at what the estimated cost should be for levels 4 and 5. We have broken out the additional controls on level 3. So look at that, get some cost realization. We've put it out there for companies to be able to ingest it and to build their rates and spend plans around it. Hi, Lani, welcome back.
Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Our time together is drawing to a close. I want to thank Katie Arrington and Ed Bassett for sharing their insights, for just giving us a sense of how critical these issues are at all levels of for contractors and subcontractors and what have you, and even in our personal lives. I was struck as I was listening to all of this in terms of things we ought to be doing with our passwords and whatnot. I was really struck by Katie's statement that this is how the adversary will get to us. So Katie, do you have any final remarks?
Well, first of all, thank you to the Native Hawaiian Association and what you guys are doing. I loved my time there. It is a beautiful, magical place, and thank goodness you're keeping it so pristine. And to Ed and to NeoSystems, I do thank you guys for the opportunity. The Native American, my son-in-law, I really hope he opens a small business, because he's brilliant, and I will say he's Navajo, and I want him to do well. So stay in there. We need you.
Okay.
And I will tell you, I leave all my things the same way these days. Please stay positive, test negative, be kind, but know that no one in this great cosmic thing we've got going on right here, that every one of you is essential and critical and needed. And we didn't put the CMMC out there to make you go away. We wanted you to be sure that you'd be there for the long term, because you are that important. I am going to sign off because I have to get back inside the Pentagon for a 5 o'clock meeting, and I'm late. Ed, as always, wonderful to see you. Lani, thank you for the opportunity to come into people's homes and their workspaces, and affording me the capability and the opportunity to talk about how critical everybody is. Take care.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Katie. Take care.
So we are out of time. So rather than turning it over to Ed, let me just quickly say, take a look at the resources tab. Although I can't see it, I've been advised that it's on your the participants page next to the overview tab and the ask a question tab. And for those of you who asked questions that we didn't have time to get to, Ed Bassett or Elizabeth Jimenez, also of NeoSystems, will follow up with you via email in the coming days. So that's it. I'll leave you with, I'm not sure if we're still recording, but just in case, I will leave you with contact information for Ed and Elizabeth. It's ed.bassett, B-A-S-S-E-T-T, at NeoSystemsCorp, all one word, .com, or elizabeth.jimenez, J-I-M-E-N-E-Z, at neosystemscorp.com, and I'm at Lani at DawsonHawaii.com. So thank you all for joining us. If you've got questions about NHOA or NACA, take a look at our web pages, nhoassociation.org, and NACA is at nativecontractors.org. Mahalo nui loa from Hawaii to
Thank you all.
all of you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.